Well, hello everyone. My name is Joel. Cheyenne is my assistant for this evening. We're both in the reference department, and we are happy you are joining us. This is an event called the Art of Holiday Letters. We're just going to be talking about different options for writing the letter, some design ideas. Basically, the event will be split into two different parts. We're going to be talking about writing the letter first, and then I've got some different designs for your envelopes that I'm going to share, and then I'm going to be doing those in real time so you can see everything that I'm doing and all the equipment that I'm using. Feel free to ask questions at any time. If you want to use the chat function, Cheyenne's going to be looking at that, so it's whatever you feel comfortable with. All right, so first things first, we're going to talk about just some rules of thumb, things to keep in mind when you're planning your letter. We're going to talk about some different strategies for a bulk mailing. And the first thing that I always try to do is think about how many letters are you trying to send? How much time do you have to do this? Because that's going to, help you decide, do you want to type this up and print out a bunch of copies, or do you actually want to try to handwrite? I handwrite most of mine in years past. This year, my wife and I decided we're going to send out over 100, so I will not be handwriting those. And another thing to keep in mind is I will try to send a picture with my letter. So early fall, I will decide, what do I want to get a photographer? How many copies do I want to do that? All that stuff takes time. Typically by November, we're starting to think about, okay, do we need extra addresses? Who are we sending these to? And then I'm writing my first draft. So some of the rules of thumb that I'm going to go over come from this book that I hope you all can see. It's called The Art of the Personal Letter by Margaret Shepard. I read this probably about 10 years ago. Really great book. She is a calligrapher, but she kind of walks you through different kind of personal correspondence and different ideas for making that, just personal and just getting in the habit of doing it. We don't currently have this in the catalog, but we've got a copy on order. So if you'd like to check that out. But some of the things that she says for the holiday letter is, of course, starting early. And then if you want to write a family style letter, getting your family members involved. So if you have children, maybe you could have them summarize in one sentence, how they felt about their first year of school, or, summer camp, or whatever it is. Thank you, Cheyenne. So starting early, involving others, and then for my letters, I tried to choose an overarching theme. So obviously, we've all experienced a pandemic this year. So you could choose to talk about what your experience was during all of that. Or for me, my wife and I had a child this year. So my letters, which I haven't started yet, are probably going to be talking about that. Choosing that theme keeps me from rambling, which I have trouble staying on point sometimes when I'm writing letters, especially since I'm handwriting most of mine. I'm starting from scratch pretty much every time. I've got some main points, but I don't actually write down a rough draft. Probably a good idea, but I've just never done it. But that way, if you have a theme, you just have a way to kind of keep things focused. My goal for my holiday letters is to share my life in a way that includes the person I'm writing to, something that they will find interesting. I'm sure you all have received letters where someone is talking about their impossibly talented children, or it's just like, well, I met these folks, that's not my experience with them at all, or whatever. So I just try to keep that in mind when I'm writing mine, because I want them to be excited when they get this letter. I don't want them to treat it like, junk mail or whatever. So the last thing that she says is just to save a copy. If you do a memory book or a scrapbook, saving your holiday letter and looking over them over a course of time can be a fun thing to do. I don't do that, but I see the value in it, and will probably do that more and more as I continue to do this. But that's pretty much what she had to say. Again, those little things came from Margaret Shepherd. And one thing that I wanted to share with you all, I'm going to switch my camera. Bear with me.
And just in case you were trying to write down the name and author of that book, I sent out a chat to everybody with the name of that book and that author. So if you didn't quite get a chance to get it written down, if you open up the chat window, that info is right there. And I'll be sure to add in any other pertinent information like that. I'll drop it in the chat to everyone.
Okay, can everyone see my hands here? Is that coming through? Okay, so I wanted to show you all like an example of what you can do with the yearly review format. And a lot of times when you're sending your holiday letter, it's kind of, you know, a summary of what happened in your family's life over the past year. And my friend Tucker sends me these comic books every year, and I look forward to it the entire year. And it's just him doing his holiday letter in like comic book format. So you've got like, they're typically mixed media, and he's telling different stories, and then he's also showing pictures of his trips or whatever he's doing that year. He goes to Burning Man a lot, so a lot of times the holiday letters I've gotten have to do with that, and they're just really fun. Obviously, he does have to spend a fair amount of time putting these together, but just a different way of using this format. I will probably never do something like that, but I just love getting those. Another idea, if you have like 2 weeks before you need to send out your letter and, you know, it's just not happening, you know, no shame. And, you know, dear great Aunt Marie, have a good time visiting your family in Florida. Merry Christmas, Joel. No shame in that. This year, like I said, we're sending out so many letters. We are doing the Shutterfly thing. If you're not familiar with that, it's a online thing that you just upload your pictures, you choose your pre-printed format, and then they mail you a bunch of pre-printed cards. If you're sending out a bulk mailing, that's one way of getting it done. It can get pricey, but it's super convenient. Another thing to keep in mind is your postage. If you are sending out a large size card with a picture or different goodies inside, postage right now is 55 cents. That only covers 1 ounce. If you are sending a lot of things, it might go over ounce, and that's going to cost an additional 15 cents. So I buy a lot of 15-cent stamps just so I can do the 70 cents for a 2 ounce card. There's nothing more frustrated than going through all this trouble to do your card and then it gets sent back to you. That frustrates the heck out of me. Anyway, so those are just some different ideas for your main holiday card. Another thing I wanted to talk about is sending thank you cards. I did not grow up sending thank you cards after receiving gifts, but now that, you know, I send a lot more mail, I've started doing that more and more, and people, it kind of catches them off guard because they're not used to receiving thank you mail. So pretty much all I have to say about that is I just, you know, mention the gift by name, mention what said gift is going to be used for or how it's going to impact my family's life. That's it. So if you're trying to get children involved with writing letters, especially around this time of year, that can be a good way to include them. Is there any questions? Or I know I'm not spending a ton of time on the writing. There are professional writers in the audience. I am not one of them. So do you have any questions or different ideas that you guys do for your yearly letters?
I'm kind of interested in why people signed up, or, you know, what drew you to the letter writing class.
Ditto.
Yeah, I signed up because I have for the last 10 years sent a Christmas letter along with cards only to the out-of-town people. I send very few in town Christmas cards, and depending on the year, have a different focus for the card or for the letter. This year, I intend, since I've done a lot of reading and staying at home and canceling things, I've send a title and an author of a book that I've read that I found particularly interesting, and a one-sentence summary of that book. But I have also started including humor with something, like, 90% of the people that buy Christmas trees buy pre-lit Christmas trees. The other 10% people that don't buy pre-lit Christmas trees are in therapy. So, there are little things you can throw in throughout the body of your letter to kind of give it a humorous slant. But I was really reinforced with sending Christmas letters when it said that although only about 60% of the people send a Christmas letter in their card, 90% are happy to get them, whether they send a letter or not. And I find that really, really true. I'm always happy to get a letter. I love anything in the mail, anything.
Mm-hmm. Most of my mail's bills. So yeah, if someone sent it to me, it's a good day. Quick question. So I know I was speaking to Catherine earlier, and I know Nancy are both former librarians. Are there anyone else here tonight that are current or former librarian?
My mother is.
Oh, nice.
And I read all the time.
Of course. Cool. I was just curious.
I'm actually a writing teacher. That's what I did when I was working at the university. So, and I'm a dilettante. I've been taking classes as a senior citizen, which has been really fun. So I've been buying textbooks instead of novels. My mother, who reads a novel a week, or at least, doesn't understand my approach. But,
Mm. Well,
and I signed up for the class because I had written an elaborate, it got more elaborate every year, Christmas letter. It got really involved. And the last one I wrote was in 2005, which was 2 years before Facebook. And I don't think there was one typo in it. It was beautiful. It had all sorts of interesting pictures. And I think I burned myself out on trying to write the perfect letter. So I was interested. It's kind of like your Christmas tree joke, Nancy. I had overburdened myself and then just couldn't even imagine writing that letter ever again. So I thought maybe this would jumpstart my something I had done for a long time. Maybe it was 7-8 years. Yeah. So I think limiting your perfectionism is one of those things I would like to learn from y'all.
So one thing that my pen pals could tell you, and my friends and family that I send letters to, I do read the letters I write before I send them, but they're inevitably littered with grammatical or not spelling errors so much as just like I'm notorious for leaving a word out because I just don't, my hand doesn't move as fast as this thing does. So I just kind of resigned myself that I'm going to look stupid to some people sometimes just because I forgot to write, a verb or whatever it is. But I just, it gives me a chance to connect with these folks. A lot of people I write to, I haven't seen in person in many years. So that kind of keeps me coming back to it. And I just, I try to keep mine relatively short since I am handwriting most of these. They're not, I mean, if I typed it out, it probably wouldn't be a full page single space at all, maybe like half a page or 3/4 tops. So anyway. there any other questions? Or I was gonna just go ahead and get started with the envelope designs unless someone else had something they wanted to ask.
Your question about why we wanted to do this class, like I'm very, very excited about that envelope portion you're about to get into. My version of envelope decorating is to grab whatever stickers I have on hand and plaster the envelopes with. But I got interested in this class because I have a greeting card business. I'm a local artist in Fayetteville, and I hand draw cards because for my whole life we moved around Pennsylvania, Missouri, Wisconsin, now Arkansas, and that meant that the people that I loved a lot were always really far away. So I started an art card business 5 years ago, and I just do like, fine art cards, like kind of like this one.
Mm-hmm.
Or for the holidays, to all my friends and family, I have about 25 cards on my list this year. I did this one for this season.
Nice.
A little gingerbread birdhouse.
I have your Happy Holidays card to send out this year. And let me tell you,
that retired this year, so it's not. I don't even have any here at home. It's gone. When it's gone, it's gone. So I'm glad you got one.
Not intimidating, by the way, to have someone who actually is a fine artist for a living at this event. I will go ahead and say, if you couldn't tell, I am a hobbyist at best.
But that comic, I'm getting so much ideas.
I did not make that.
Your friends, your card, that's such a cool idea. That's the other reason I joined this class. I really need inspiration because so much of it is I do the artwork for the cards, but I want to personalize it much more.
Sure. By the way, thank you for bringing that back up. My friend Tucker, who makes that card, wanted me to give everyone his email address in case you wanted to be put on his mailing list. I told him I would when I asked him permission to show these. So anyway, it's in the chat if you're interested. But anyway, if anyone else would like to share why they joined tonight's event, feel free.
Yeah, my name is Katya, and I joined this event. I'm a food scientist, and I used to go to the university and rent their pilot plant so that I could make some cured smoke, either turkeys or chicken, to give away for the either Thanksgiving or Christmas time. But my situation has changed, and I can no longer do that. But I would think that if I can take that creativity and put it into a card, that would be not as nice as the chickens or turkeys that I was giving away before.
Well, it'd be hard to replace that, but
I know.
best of luck.
Thank you.
One last thing I did forget to mention as far as writing tips, and this is something I try to keep in mind that really stretches me, but since I'm not the most articulate writer, is being super deep. If you're going to tell a story to someone who didn't experience it themselves, you really do have to be super detailed so that they can feel like they're getting something from your experience that you're sharing with them. And sometimes I'm not really good at that. And I read, sometimes I'll, think back over what I've said to someone in a letter, and it's like, wow, you just told them about something without really describing it at all. So anyway, that is something I strive for, but it's kind of a challenge.
Joel, kind of in line with that, I try to start a Christmas letter in January, and I write little things that have happened along the way. Like we had a huge vet bill on one of our cats, and then turned around and adopted another one. So, I forget those things by December. But so, you can save it on your computer by jotting yourself notes, and you may not use what you actually jotted down, but it is there should you need it.
That would make that way easier. I journal every day, but going back through them when it's time to write the letter, it's
same kind of thing.
Right. Well, if no one objects, I'm going to go ahead and switch my camera over. Like I say, if you have a question, feel free to stop me. And if you want to put it in the chat, Cheyenne is looking at those and we'll get started. I've got three main designs to share with you all. The first one, excuse me, I'm having to reposition my chair. And before I show you these, I got some really good ideas from this book that's in our collection. I think one of you may have this on hold. There's a hold on it called Holiday Hand Lettering. And there were just some different projects that you can do. They're all paper craft projects. This one you'll recognize here in a second. Took some inspiration from that, but there's some really good ideas just for pen and ink, different fonts, you know, different stuff like that. I like hand lettering a lot. So anyway, the first design I'm going to show you is something that I did with a stamp and just I hand drew the twine just to make this look like a package. So this is what the finished product is going to look like. And I'm going to go ahead and do that for you really quickly. I'm using a I guess a package tag or name tag stamp that I found. And instead of buying like a large ink pad that I could just stamp this on, a lot of them were small. So basically I take a smaller ink pad and just hand ink it myself. I am new to doing inking like stamp designs. Typically I will do just stuff where I just hand draw stuff. You'll notice I'm doing this at an angle, so I still have room for my stamp. So there's that. Kind of wish I'd done it a little to the left, but no worries. Doesn't have to be perfect. I don't know if this camera translates. I'm actually left-handed, so I have to be super careful not to smudge everything I write and draw. So after you have your stamp in place, I'm just going to, I should have practiced doing this while talking. I'm just lightly drawing some pencil lines to make my twine. If I was super anal retentive, I would have blocked off some of my stamps so I could have the twine go like over the stamp like it would be in real life. But that would take me a long time to do, so I didn't do that. And if you all are interested in what pins or whatever I used, I can show you those. I tried to make it so each of these designs didn't use a ton of different gear. I know especially with like stamps and I'm going to show you an embossing design here in a second. Some of that stuff can get really expensive. Especially if you use like with embossing, they have like a heat gun and that was $70. So, I mean, if I wasn't using it for this, I don't know that I would have gotten that for personal use. So anyway, I've done my twine and now I'm actually going to just start doing my colors. I'll do all my red first and I'm going to do them at an angle. So just quickly drawing these in. I'm just using a red Sharpie, nothing fancy. I'm making all of these go in the same angle. And that's pretty much all I'm doing.
Rachel, any way you can lift that a little closer to the camera just so we get a little zoom in on, yeah. See it? Yes, it's kind of like a little candy cane stripe.
Yeah. I looked at this like envelope and just thought that it reminded me of just like, I don't know, package paper. So I decided to make it look like a little present. Also, gotta say a big shout out to Shindig Papery. It's a card store on Block Street. They donated a huge box of envelopes. And will be using those at several events. Once we finally do have in-person events, they gave me a ton. So definitely wanted to say thank you for that. Okay, for the white, I am using this Uniball. It's just a white gel pen. And I experimented with some different chalk pens, and I didn't really like the way they didn't really work great on this paper. That's one thing I wanted to mention. When you're doing these different kind of designs, you might practice a little bit. It's because it really does depend on what kind of envelopes you're using. If you try to do, for instance, I don't know if you can tell, but this is a very shiny kind of a gloss envelope, and most pens, gel pens and stuff, it did not look good. The ink from the stamp just didn't really translate well for the gloss. So I'm going to color this in really quickly. I think when I timed myself when I was doing this in practice, each one took me about closer to like 7 minutes all told with the name and everything in there. And you can put your address on the front if you want to. I actually like putting my address in the back so I can have the front just be whatever artwork and the person's address in the stamp and call it a day. The post office will still mail it. My wife invested in a personal stamp, and I botched the stamp on this one, but she just found this on Etsy, and it's got our address in the shape of Arkansas. So that's typically what we use. And then one thing I like to do with the actual name, I like to do the person's name in a completely different ink than I do the address. So I'm using a silver Sharpie, and I like the way that it turned out. However, once I did it in practice, I noticed that the Sharpie kind of, I don't know, it needed a little something. So I used a fine tip Sharpie pen to quickly, and I won't do the whole thing because it is a little tedious, to kind of make it pop. Whoop. You'll notice in my finished example, just doing the outline and the black fine tip really kind of, I don't know, I really like the way it turned out. So that was pretty much the idea here. And I'm going to go ahead and call it good. Does anyone have any questions on this one? Do you want me to? Sure. Excuse us just a second. There you go. Does everyone see that? So that's that. This next one is going to be an embossing design. So what you need for embossing, if you're not familiar, is just a stamp, just like you would regularly use, and then embossing powder, embossing ink, which embossing ink really is just, it's just like clear ink. You'll see it when I use it. And then you need a heat gun. The heat gun will kind of set the design and kind of keep the glitter in place. And if you've ever used glitter, you know that in place is like relative. You're still going to get everywhere. It's glitter. So this is kind of the design I'm going to show you in just a second. I did practice with other designs. If you are going to use a huge stamp, excuse me, like this, the challenge you're going to have is getting the embossing ink to take in a uniform fashion. And then when it comes time for you to actually stamp the thing, you will want to place something under the area to kind of raise it up, because getting it to like transfer, consistently was hard. And as you can tell, I had to do it multiple times, and it kind of looks a little bit like a snowy mess. So I kind of like the much simpler design here. So that's what I'm actually going to do real quick. Also wanted to mention, you'll notice, if the light catches this just right, I don't get super like crazy, but I do use a ruler to kind of like give myself some guidelines, because I can tend to like go at an angle and I want the name to be centered. So typically I do that first. I will put the person's name after I have done my guidelines with a ruler, as you can see here. And then I will take a white eraser, because I find that it doesn't smudge as much as like your typical pencil eraser would. And I just get rid of it real quick. Make sure your pen ink has dried, or you will smear the heck out of it. And not all pens work well with what I'm doing right now. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'm just gonna take my snowflake stamp and as you can tell, the embossing ink is just like clear. That's all it looks like. And now I'm gonna get the pencil erasers off there. We put the super fancy piece of paper underneath, because I'm gonna, once you put the powder on, you have to shake it off. And I'm trying to do this cleanly so our facilities people do not hate my guts. Okay, so obviously a ton's gonna come out, so you just shake it a little bit. I know some people like to use like a lid or something to just kind of dump it into. So there it is. I'm gonna hit it with the heat gun to get it to set after I get some of the more debris off of there. The heat gun was a little pricey. It's one of the things I kind of don't like about doing these kind of things. Here's what it looks like. It's basically just like a small hair dryer. And just gonna kind of run it over there. Again, the purpose is to set it, and also it kind of brings out a little bit of the sparkle. You don't have to do it super long. That's pretty much it. And then, not perfect, but there you go. That's pretty much it. Any questions on that?
Since you mentioned it's the heat gun is similar to a small hair dryer, why can't you use a small hair dryer?
I think it would probably, you would have to turn it on the lowest setting, or it would probably blow a lot harder. The air pressure on this is not super high. That's the only thing I would worry about if you're using a blow dryer, is it would be too strong. It would blow off more of the powder. It might not though. It'd be worth checking because that costs $70. So that's, I mean, if you think you're going to be using a lot, maybe, you know, something you want to invest in. Oh, here's the real fun part, is getting the genie back in the bottle. Let's see if we can do it. Okay. And of course, glitter everywhere, as you can see there. Okay, our third design I wanted to share is really just kind of pen and ink with the little holly bush there. As you can see, here we are. I've got my pencil lines, and let me go ahead and erase those. Alita, by the way, is my mother. I decided I should probably use a name that I'm used to writing a whole lot. Oh, shoot. Cheyenne, would you pick that up for me? I'm sorry, thank you. Okay. All right, so for this one, really all you need is a pencil. And really all you're doing is make just a couple, like, I don't know, like a really flat S, like completely stretched out like this. And I'm doing that on the top left and the bottom right. And then once I have done that, I'm going to make 3 leaves on each of them. And I kind of look, these kind of look like little flames like you'd put at the end of a candle. And I'm making sure they kind of all touch and are connected to the main stem. And then I'm going to put a stem in each of those. And then I'm doing the same thing on the rest of these. I'll do it pretty quickly.
What is that backdrop you're writing on called?
This mat, it's called a 2-sided craft mat. So one side is really smooth, and the other side, the side I'm working on, is kind of harder, ridger, or more rigid, excuse me. It's made so you can, like, if you're using like an X-Acto knife or something like that. But I like it because it's got the grid on here. If I was using my ruler and I was trying to be super precise, it kind of helps.
Thanks.
Sure.
Bill, there was a question about where exactly your wife found that personalized stamp on Etsy. I don't know if you remembered the exact.
I don't. I asked her that this morning, and she had no idea.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. We'll do a quick Google and
thank you.
see what kind of ones I can find.
Yeah. She got really sick. So our insurance through State Farm sends us like these address labels every year for like my birthday, but they only have my name, which she really resents that. So she took it upon herself to find like a stamp for us. I kind of botched that, but sorry, I'm going to redo that last one. I'm not happy with the way that turned out.
How old is the baby?
Our son will turn 4 months in about a couple of weeks. So he is pretty new. And that is obviously one of the big reasons why I'm not able to do a big mailing this year, or like a handwritten mailing, excuse me.
Yeah, you're not getting any sleep, I bet.
Not a lot. So, but it's worth it, and we love them. So after I've drawn all these, I am going to get my green fine tip Sharpie, excuse me. I don't know if you all have a whole bunch of art stuff, but I have found that I have to keep it in the tackle box or I get yelled at. So there it is. Okay. Okay, so the next thing I do is I just outline everything I just did in green. And I'm just using another, whoops, that's a little, there we go. Another Sharpie fine tip. And again, this one took me about 5 or so minutes in practice. I move a lot slower, of course, when I'm talking. I've known a few different professional artists in my life, and the thing that always amazes me the most is not necessarily like how great they are at drawing or whatever. It's sometimes just how unbelievably fast they can do it, like especially sketching and things like that. I have a friend that's a comic book artist, and he is able to do these pretty detailed, like rough drafts. But you know, they look better than anything I could ever create, and he does them like in about 5 to 10 minutes. After I finish doing this last one, what I'm going to do next is just erase all my pencil markings. And again, I've tested this pen and know that it dries very quickly, so I can get by with using the white eraser and not have things look completely awful. So of course, now that I say that, it smears. Of course it does. Yep. The last thing you're going to do with this one is just add in little berries at the bottom of each one to make it look like a holly. Or I guess this is, what is this, mistletoe? I don't know.
Holly is red and mistletoe is white. Something I have recently learned in watching many a Hallmark Christmas movie.
No, that's so good.
Because inevitably holly is used as mistletoe and it becomes a whole thing at some point in the movie. So fun fact.
It becomes a plot device.
It does.
Okay, so this is pretty much it, if you can see that real well. And that, you know, especially if you do a few, you crank that out. And yeah, just a quick way to make your envelopes look a little more festive. As far as stickers, Amanda, I do have some little polar bear stickers. If it were me, I would probably place this right here underneath my address. So I did want to say one other thing about addresses. So I've noticed, send a lot of mail, some of it gets sent back. The post office is pretty awesome about like not caring about the name. So I could write like Swamp Dog and put the right address and it would get delivered unless I'm sending it to an apartment or a PO box. Then all of a sudden they start to really care. So if you are sending mail to a PO box or an apartment, one thing that I've had to make sure is when my friends that live in apartments, I ask them like, hey, what name do they have at your apartment? You know, sometimes my friends will use their first name when they go by their middle. So when I write a letter to, you know, William, it gets sent back to me because they expect me to write, you know, Grant or whatever. Anyway, something to keep in mind. And I'm going to switch back. So that was pretty much all the art stuff I had to share with you all. Do you guys have anything that y'all typically do with your envelopes? Do y'all ever try different designs or stickers? Or I know some folks like to do kind of like a scrapbooky, like kind of collage.
I think as festive as I get is I have a wax seal, and that I'm a really big fan of the wax seal. It makes me feel very fancy.
So I thought about doing a wax seal for this event.
Yeah.
The library does not like us to set things on fire.
Fire.
So you have to have a candle
Yes.
to do
Yes.
that. So that's the heat gun was as far as I could stretch them. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yep. And my one, I guess, recommendation on the wax seal business, you can get the stick, which is essentially a candle that you light and just hover, or they have the little like nuggets of wax and you can put them in a melter and then pour. And I would very much recommend the little nuggets because the candle and then the wax dripping and then the stamping and then the long string of like wax drying can get messy. And then, you know, you have like a string of wax all along your envelope. So
Yes, all the videos that I watched on how to do that, they all use the melter. So they take this little like, you know, tray, put it on top of their jar candle, put their nugget in when that's melted, and then just pour it over.
Just pour it over.
Yep. Any other questions? That's pretty much all we had for tonight. I do have a favor, if you all have time and of course a desire to do so. If you would like to email me any ideas for future letter writing events, we do want to do more of these. Obviously, we had a long waiting list for tonight, so there is interest. So if you have any kind of like subject or a topic that you would like to have seen covered, please let us know.
Joel?
Mm-hmm.
I really love the ideas. I've got like, I'm writing them down and like sketching. This is awesome. Thank you. I'm trying to come up with more ideas for like the address, the recipient's address box. Like, I'm just gonna freehand. I don't have a stamp or anything. I don't want to buy one. I might get one of those like Etsy stamps someday. Okay. But also I wanted to give a shout out if any of you are looking for cards or looking for like personalized cards or unique cards. There's a bunch of us local artists There's a Ozark Cards Company, which is Tina Oppenheimer does that. And there's Becky Hawk's art cards, which are like beautiful customized collages. And then I also just wanted to share, like, my art business is now online. So you could find all of our work, all of us local artists, at stores like Ozark Natural Foods or even Center Street Mercantile. I know those two stores are open in Fayetteville, but I wanted to share my website in case people didn't want to go out
Sure.
and needed like a pack of holiday cards that wasn't like from Walmart using sweatshop labor. Because it's actually cool because I found a way to use sustainably sourced paper for my cards too. So if you do care about the environment and local artists or local economy or social justice, that's just a great option to combine with your holiday letters and envelopes.
Would you mind popping that into the chat box, Amanda? And I will say, typically in years past, we've had like holiday markets and different craft shows that have highlighted local artists. So that's where I buy a lot of my cards. Obviously not doing that this year, but every year I go to Shindig Papery after the holidays, and they do it as early as like second week of January, and I buy. I should have brought them with me, but I buy the card sets that have like 10 or 8 in a box from like Crane and Co. is one of the big ones, or Vera Rang is a different designer. So these are pretty fancy and they're like deeply discounted. So that's where I get a lot of my non-local cards, but the holiday fairs is where I typically go. But Amanda, do you know of any buddy that's trying to do a socially distanced craft fair this year? Does anyone feel free to jump in?
I've heard of some, but I'm not participating
Okay.
this year. And a lot of our retailers that I do sell at are closed. So
sure. Well, any other questions before we wrap it on up? Thank you all very much for coming. Didn't really know how this was going to go.
Thank you. I got some good ideas.
Oh, good. Thank you. Well, I'm
I
going to
also
go ahead.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up then. I'm going to email you guys the YouTube, of course. It'll probably be in a couple of days. And we will be opening the library for our new expansion early in 2021. Fingers crossed. Very excited about that. So we've learned not to give a specific date, sadly, but we are working very hard to make that happen. So keep a lookout.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
thanks all of you.
Good night, y'all.
Night.
Night.